Question number 2, Jean learned in school that fertilizers affect the growth of plants. She wanted to know how the amount of fertilizers used could affect its growth. Which of the following should she do? Is it letter A, conduct an experiment to find out? Letter B, write to the Bureau of Soils? Letter C, ask her science teacher for the correct answer? Or letter D, look for the correct answer in a book? All right, now many of you are answering letter A. So going back to our question here, she learned in school that fertilizers affect the growth of plants. Now she wanted to find out how the amount of fertilizers used could affect its growth. Okay, so she actually has a hypothesis. How, or she also has a scientific question, how does the amount of fertilizers used could affect the growth of plants? And so the correct answer here for her to find out, correct answer of course would be letter A, to conduct an experiment to find out, and that is the correct answer. Okay, so for number 2, the correct answer is also letter A. Please put a check mark if your answer is correct. Now we know that this is one step in our scientific method. We are all very familiar with our scientific method. When we were still students, the scientific method is usually the first topic in our science subjects. Okay, now what are the different steps in the scientific method? Okay, so I have here on the slides the various steps that we have in our scientific method as used in scientific investigations. Okay, so the first step that we have here is observation. Now we know that when we say observation, we are using the 5 senses that we have. So the sense of sight, the sense of hearing, the sense of smell. Okay, so we are using the different senses that we have for us to learn or to come up with questions with regards to our environment. Okay, so that's observation. Now I have included one term here, which is inference. Inference po is different from observation because observation per se are the things that we come up with through the use of our senses. But when you say inference, these are opinions that we come up with based on our observation. Okay, so when you say observation again, you come up with an observation. You have an observation because you've used your 5 senses. Now, an inference is your opinion, an opinion that you have formed based on what you have observed. Now, say you are looking at a picture, and the picture is showing you that there's the sun is shining, there's a girl, the girl is using a fan. And the question, for example, Intellect is asking you, which among the following statements is an inference with regards to the picture that we have? Okay, again, the question is about inference. Now, the choices, for example, is that the sun is shining, the girl is using a fan, the girl feels hot, or it is a sunny day. Okay, so again, the question is, which among the following statements is an inference with regards to the picture above? Okay. And the picture, in your picture, you have a sun that's shining. You have a girl who's using a fan. And your choices are the sun is shining. That's letter A. Letter B, the girl is using a fan. Letter C, it is a hot day, or the girl feels hot. And letter D, it is a sunny day. Okay. Now then, if your question is about the inference, again, inference is just an opinion which is formed based on what you have observed. In that question, the correct answer for your inference would be letter C. Okay, so letter C would be the correct answer, and that is the girl feels hot. The girl feels hot. That is your opinion based on what you have observed. You have observed that the sun is shining, so it's a sunny day, and that the girl is using a fan. Those are all your observations. So inference, again, is just an opinion based on what you have observed. Now, the second step in your scientific method that we have here is forming your scientific question. Okay, now scientific question is very important. Any type of question cannot really be a scientific question. Not all types of questions are scientific questions. When you say scientific questions, that means it requires experimentation. It cannot only be answered by just a yes or a no. Okay, so it means you really have to experiment for you to be able to answer your scientific question. So if your boyfriend or your girlfriend would ask you, do you love me? That is not a scientific question because you don't need experimentation for you to be able to answer it truthfully or maybe answer it as charing lang. Okay, so it's not a scientific question. Scientific question is a question that requires experimentation for it to be answered. Okay, now before you go to your hypothesis, usually you'd look for related studies, some relevant information that you can find. You conduct some very short research for you to be able to come up with your next step, which is the hypothesis. Now, we all know that the hypothesis is an educated guess. Okay, it is an educated guess. This usually is what we think would be the answer to our scientific question. Okay, so that's your hypothesis. Now, the next step would be experimentation. Experimentation is very important because this is how we check whether our hypothesis is true or correct or not. Okay, for us to check whether your hypothesis is correct, we do experimentation. Okay, so we experiment. Now, before or after experimentation, of course, we can come up with our data. So we gather our data, we analyze this data, we present this data through tables or maybe through graphs. Then, of course, we come up with a conclusion. Now, a conclusion would usually just restate your hypothesis. If your hypothesis was correct, your conclusion is going to restate your hypothesis. Or if your hypothesis was wrong, then your conclusion is going to negate your hypothesis. Okay, so these, ladies and gentlemen, are the different steps in your scientific method. Okay.